Hello and welcome to the Horti-Culturalists. I'm Stephen Ryan.
And I am Matthew Lucas. We do post every week on a Friday, so hit subscribe if you want to follow our continuing horticultural adventures, and do hit the thumbs up button if you like this particular video. Stephen, are we in some Elysian field?
We certainly are. In fact, we're also pretty in pink. We're today going to talk to a specialist grower of woodland ephemerals, and we're going to talk specifically about the genus Erythronium.
And am I not mistaken, are we not in a paddock of Erythronium?
We are. It is mind-blowing. I can't imagine in the wild there is this sort of biomass of Erythroniums. This has got to be one of the world's great patches of the plant.
I am very excited. Now, whose patch is this, Stephen?
Well, Tonkin bulbs. Jane Tonkin is the current owner of the company.
Yes.
And they've been in existence for 2 generations now.
Yep.
And they have some wonderful plants. So why don't we go off and meet Jane so that she can explain these plants to us in depth?
Very keen to. Jane?
Yes, we're coming.
Hello, Jane.
Hi.
Thank you so much for having us. Firstly, my tiny brain is blown by your paddock of Erythroniums.
You've come back down to earth for a little while now.
Just a little. Let me hold one of these. Viewers, goodness me, I mean, you're probably familiar. Look how gorgeous that is. Wow. Now, Stephen,
Yes.
you obviously have known Jane for a while.
Yes, probably more years than either of us really want to think about. Now, I've never seen Erythroniums in quantity like this anywhere. So how did this incredible paddock of them evolve?
Before me, Stephen, which, and no, I'm not revealing how old I am. So years and years ago, we started off with seed so that we were growing them then for a commercial selling value. And it got to the stage where we just decided that we would spread extra seed and let it do its thing. And it's happy.
And so this dates right back to Dad's era.
Dad's era, yes. We lost my father back in '96, but he started growing rare and unusual things back in the late 40s onwards.
Which is interesting because it wasn't an era in which gardening was taken as a really serious pursuit, and most of the nurseries were growing pretty bland, ordinary plant material. So for your dad to have stepped up and done that is quite remarkable. There would have only been a handful of people that were sort of thinking along the same lines as he.
Yeah, and we still had to supplement all of this with a cut flower income, but he also started off growing carrots and potatoes and things. It was the fact that
More prosaic things.
well, it makes more money too. But he used to pore over these seed catalogues and things and find things that were basically rare and difficult to give himself a challenge. And I think that's where I've got the love and passion for things that are a little bit more difficult.
So it is genetic.
It is genetic, yeah.
So, quick question, and a gentleman never asks, but how old do you think this paddock is then?
It's about 50 years old.
So these Erythroniums have been growing for 50 years.
Yeah.
Now, Jane, true confession, I have secretly bought things from your website. I live for your seasonal releases. So just give the viewers a bit of an overview. What do you grow and specialise in?
We grow a lot of woodlanders from all over the world, particularly from northern China and the Himalaya, but we also grow a lot of other sun-loving things from South Africa and South America. So there's a wide range for different garden settings.
Yeah, and I think it's true to say that you do 2 seasonal releases, so your website is active twice a year?
Yes, that's exactly right. So from January to the middle of March is our summer dormant things, and then from May through to the middle of August for the winter dormant things. So if you're interested, people can just email and go on a list, which they'll get the 2 notifications each year.
We will put the link below, and you do ship to all the quarantine states in Australia?
We do, yes.
Which not many people do, but alas, no international shipping.
No, that's a bit difficult for us. So anywhere in Australia you can order from us. So that's
fantastic.
There you go. Have a look at the website because you'll be blown away.
Jane, we should actually let our viewers know what the proper botanical name of this particular plant is.
So it's Erythronium revolutum.
We're going to get more and more into the whys and wherefores of Erythronium growing right now.
All right, let's get down to the nitty-gritty of Erythronium propagation. So how does it all work?
Generally, it's from seed, and the fresher, the better. So if you're importing seed from overseas and things, it can be 6 months out of date, etc. So the fresher the better. You'll be able to see round your feet there's these beautiful little first year babies that have got still the little seed capsule on the end.
So you get the first year seedling comes up, obviously you're not going to see flowers. Second year, what?
You'll get a true leaf. So,
So it'll start to look like an erythronium.
And then the second year you might get the 2 leaves, and then the 3rd, 4th year on is when they start to flower. So it can take some time from seed through to flowering, but that's the fun thing about gardening too.
Yeah, exactly. We don't need to be in any sort of hurry, although I'd like to recreate this as quickly as possible, please. All right, I have to say, Jane, that I think Erythroniums are one of the most elegant plants. They've got such poise and beauty, but I believe that they're rather hard to dig out.
They can be once they've grown in the ground, Stephen, yes. They have this little trick of pulling themselves down.
Yeah.
So you can, in the patch in front of us where I've dug for orders and things,
Yep.
you can see that there's not as many flowering. My trick is that I will plant back as I dig, whatever's not flowering size. But sometimes they go deeper than the depth of my fork. Those ones just stay there. So that's why some of them are still flowering. Those are the ones that can be down over 12 inches deep.
Yeah. So the soil type, of course, is important for growing them well because they like to pull themselves down. So what would you call your particular soil type here in the Dandenong Ranges?
We have this beautiful volcanic chocolate soil, rich humus, that beautiful loamy sort of thing that you get under deciduous trees and things like that. It's yummy, yummy, yummy.
So it's good for potatoes and for Erythroniums.
Exactly,
Yeah, so,
except I think I'd prefer the field of Erythroniums to the field of potatoes.
well,
but,
so would I, and I'm not sure they'd taste as good though. So if you're going to start digging bulbs for orders, what time of the year, seasonally, do you do that?
From January onwards, so they'll naturally die down as we get into early summer. So when they're dormant, you can come over here and harvest, and you've got a fair window through till about the middle of March before they start to make new roots.
So for our American viewers, we have to point out that that's our summer months.
Yes.
It would be the reverse for them.
For them, yes, exactly right. Yeah.
Jane, this is so beautiful. I know you're all sort of seasoned professionals. You're like, oh, field of Erythroniums, but I've seen one in a pot once.
Yeah. Well, see, you're in heaven now.
I literally am. Maybe I am dead. Oh my goodness. Now, practical questions though. So where are they from as a species?
Most of them are from North America.
Yep.
And basically from stream sides and things. The common name is trout lily. And as you can see by some of the foliage patterns and things, looks a bit like a trout skin.
Well, talking of that, there's a big variety of the leaves. Is that plant specific? So each plant will have a different version of that speckled...
It's just the natural thing that happens when you have a large area of one particular species.
Right.
There is a lot of variation and things. You could go through and pick out all these different
leaves.
ones if you wanted to, but Stephen's offered to dig them all for us. But yeah.
Well, I heard how hard it is. I'm amazed they burrow or they drag themselves down.
They drag themselves down to where they're comfortable.
Do you think plants are sentient? Do you think they think, you know what, I'm going to just go down a few more feet?
So then I don't get dug up and sold?
Yeah.
Well, I'd like to think that they don't want to be sold. Yeah.
Well, I want them to be sold because I want one. Now, anyway, back to the leaves. How long... I mean, these are kind of spring ephemerals, but how long will the leaf be up in the garden? Because the leaves are stunning. The flowers are gorgeous, but the leaves are really beautiful too.
So they started to come up here about the middle of August. So from
Which
then
is
on.
midwinter?
Midwinter, yeah. And then they'll eventually die down by about the middle of November. So we've got another few weeks to go before it's all gone.
That's late spring, so that's quite a long time for the leaves.
Yes, because the leaves are still there and then followed by these amazing seed pods. So even though the flower sort of bends over a bit like a lilium, the seed pod will then turn upright and the stem gets elongated as well. So you can have these seed pods sitting on a 30 centimetre plus stem. It's quite beautiful in itself.
Over a foot. Wow, so that, just in terms of garden planning then, that gives you foliage, flower, seed for like, what, 4 or 5 months?
Yeah. It's pretty good for a bulb
because
some of these things, that people grow can flower for one day and they're gone.
So
but Erythroniums are one of those things that can give your woodland garden a really, really good sort of array of colour and things too.
Bang for buck, as they say in the trade.
Yeah.
Now, as you can see behind us, we're in the midst of the most beautiful eucalypt glade, which, Jane, is not a deciduous forest by a stream.
It's certainly not.
So what are the best conditions for growing them?
Okay, here in Australia, like we are in the Dandenong Ranges.
For those of our viewers in the States, it's a cool, temperate environments?
Yes, exactly. So we're usually about 4 or 5 degrees cooler than Melbourne, which is the capital of Victoria.
Yep.
So we have that beautiful sort of more cooler evenings in the summer and
Yep.
things than Melbourne does. Our winters are a lot colder.
Yes.
And so for a lot of these things that come from Northern Hemisphere, like the Erythroniums, we have the right conditions, whereas someone that's sort of more north of us, so sort of middle of New South Wales and right up into Queensland,
Up
they would
into
struggle.
Sydney and Brisbane, yeah.
Yeah, too warm and too humid to grow these sort of things.
Right. So do they need the cold then? I mean, do they need so I'm presuming if they're from North America, they're going to get a frozen winter. Is that the case? Are they hardy to that degree?
They are hardy because they're dormant over those months where we're getting
Right.
frost and things like that. But
Yeah.
we have had frost on them and it doesn't affect them at all. But necessarily needing a cold winter?
Like peonies might.
Yeah, no. So peonies and lily of the valley definitely need that cold winter.
Right.
The Erythroniums aren't as fussy.
Okay. Well, this sounds like bliss. Now, I am noticing, is it me imagining that this is a field of pink with some exceptions?
There's a few little yellow ones mixed in.
Is there? Should we
Because
get-
there's a lot of different species to the genus. So if
Really?
Yeah, let's have a look at some others.
You got more?
Yep.
Oh my God, let's go. As promised, other colours, Jane.
Exactly. So what you're looking at here is Pagoda, and it's a cross between 2 of the species. So
Yep.
Erythronium tulimens
Yep.
and Erythronium californicum
That is a beauty, and multiple flowers per stem.
per stem.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, some of them do that. So, Jane, of the 33 accepted species in the genus, how many would you say you have in your collection?
Probably only about 8. So I've got a long way to go,
Yeah.
Stephen.
Well, that'll keep you keen.
Exactly. Yeah. There's always something, and there always has to be something else that we want.
Yeah,
So,
the thing we
Yeah.
haven't got.
So let's talk vulgar money for a second, shall we? Now, we were in your amazing field of Erythroniums, and we saw how difficult it is to get the bulbs out of the soil. So you have mentioned that people sometimes say, why is this bulb X dollars?
so expensive, especially when they see the field of them.
Yeah.
They're generally the Revolutums are $5 each, which I don't think is excessive.
Nope.
Some of the other species can go anywhere up to sort of 15 towards 20, depending on volumes that you have and how rare it is.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
some of the things like Hendersonii are very rare in this country.
Yep.
Unless Stephen's got some he's hiding and he
No,
wants to,
I haven't.
You know. So yes, it takes time, and as we said, it takes up
takes
4 years to get to a flowering size one.
Exactly.
And I think that's important for people to know that some things are sort of supermarket plants that are quick turnover, easy to propagate.
Exactly.
Some things are not, and they cost a premium. All good things cost a premium.
Yes,
They
you-
certainly do.
You don't get Yves Saint Laurent in Target.
Right, okay. He's such a philosopher.
Yeah.
Now, the other thing is, Stephen, of course, has his nursery, as do you. I am transient in a rental property, moving, so I grow things in pots. I'm observing a flowering Erythronium in a pot. Can you talk to us about pot culture? Could you permanently grow them in pots?
You can. So this is Revolution that we're looking at in the pot now.
Yep.
So that's what the same one as in the
I
field.
wouldn't stand it against me, though. It's not showing out terribly well.
With a pink. Stephen dressed for the occasion to match the Erythronium.
Yes, I did.
So you can grow them in pots, yes, but when they're dormant over the summer, you need to put them somewhere cool and dry,
Right.
so that you're not accidentally watering on a 40-degree day and the bulbs are steaming in their dormancy.
Right.
So
Erythronium.
That's 110 degrees Fahrenheit, hot, as
Yeah,
they say in the trade.
yeah, definitely keep them in the afternoon shade if
Yeah.
you're growing them down in Melbourne as well, and somewhere cool over the winter, and let them do their thing. So
But not dry out, not desiccate.
no.
Right.
Yeah. So we don't want the pot to sort of start to shrink all the goodness in there, and then the bulbs will end up just drying up and disappearing anyway.
Now, from one thing that we haven't mentioned, though, is how long would you recommend is a good time to keep them in a pot before you repot them and refurbish them with fresh potting mix and things like that?
Something like this that is delicate and requires that rich humus sort of soil to be mixed in, I think you need to do Erythroniums every year,
Right.
to be honest. Unless you're going to start off in a bigger container
Yeah.
where you can control the soil temperatures a lot easier than a small pot like
Right.
this.
Well, do I not see before me samples of your potting mix. So let's have a look at your sample soil mix.
Yep.
All right, Jane, you've got a series of different components here.
It's like making a cake.
It is like making a cake, isn't it? So we've got, well, let's run through them.
So this is our humus loam, so all that broken down leaf litter and things, like what you would find if you scrape all those oak leaves out of the way, that yummy peaty mix underneath. I'm going to get you to smell it, Stephen, come on. Yeah.
Yes, very soil-like, I have to say.
It's beautiful.
Yeah.
I'm crazy, you know this, but it has the most beautiful aroma.
Oh, it's gorgeous.
For all those woodland yummies.
All
so,
right.
yeah.
So you're using a commercial potting mix?
Commercial potting mix, which is just general potting mix. It doesn't have a lot of big bark in it. We like it without the
so
big
fairly
bark.
fine.
Yeah, so that I can add things for drainage if needed, or I can add things to make it contain a lot more moisture, which is what our woodlandery sort of things need.
All right, so you can adapt it, so that's fair enough.
Yep.
Now, you've got two different fertilisers over here,
So
which I'm assuming you use both.
I use both, yes, which might seem excessive, but I love to feed things.
Yes.
I'm a feeder. So this one is Organic Plus. So it doesn't particularly matter what brand of those sort of chook palletised manures and things you use. And this is your run-of-the-mill Blood and Bone.
Fantastic.
Which is a fabulous go-to product. So if anyone has a bag of that in their shed, that's what you need to use.
All right. And are you very specific about the
quantities?
Yeah.
I perhaps should be.
But you're perhaps not.
But I'm perhaps not. No. In other words, no, I'm not. I go by feel, and then after all these years, I've got to the stage where I go, yep, that's a great Erythronium mix, or that's a great Fritillaria mix.
Right.
So, which probably annoys my partner a lot because he's very much of sort of measuring things and stuff. So it's probably why I don't measure things now, just to,
Yes.
So what we could do is you take your normal, regular potting mix, and then we mix some of that rich, yummy humus in, and it is like baking a cake.
Yes. So you like to get a nice, thorough mixing of the components.
Yep. And Erythroniums do like a lot of food in a pot.
Yeah.
And mix all that through, and then
pot up. So there you go. So it's not rocket science exactly.
No.
So you're quite happy to just get the feel for it.
Quite happy to get the feel for it, but as you could see, it's probably 4 to 1. So 4 of the potting mix to 1 of your humus mix. For those out there that want to do it properly, because Jane just hasn't. But anyway, that's okay.
Now, when you're potting the bulbs in it, how deeply would you put them in the pot?
So what we will do is we're going to be very naughty, and we're going to knock out a growing one.
Here's the sacrificial
You get to do this, not me.
Poor little thing. Now, if we look at it closely, you can see that the bulbs have actually pulled themselves all the way down to the bottom of the pot.
Because this one's been in a couple of years.
But that does illustrate the point of growing them in containers. They will tend to pull themselves down.
And repotting each year is a good idea.
Yeah. So if we were going to...
you can do it.
I don't know whether I should be doing this or not, but anyhow, all right, let's go. We'll start to pull away the potting mix here and see if we can't expose a bulb or two. Yeah, so we'll get all of the extraneous material away, and then we should be able to just, hopefully, you can see the long white shoots that the leaves come.
Do you need a job, Stephen?
Do I need a job?
You're doing well. Yeah.
All right, now here we go. You can see that this bulb, which, as Jane said, has been in the pot for quite a long time, has actually pulled itself right to the very bottom, and there, in fact, it is with the leaf attached. All right, so Jane, you've got this little bulb here, and it does, in fact, illustrate one of the common names, which, of course, is the dog-tooth violet.
Yes.
And, of course, they're not violets, nonetheless, but they do have a dog tooth, a canine tooth sort of bulb.
Yes, yes.
So, now, a couple of things that we need to mention in passing here. The bulb is very fragile.
They are. They can snap very easily. So you have to be very careful. And please actually don't do this at home while they're in active growth, because you might cry.
Yes. Yeah. We shouldn't be doing any of this, but this is just basically to show people what they're going to end up with. So the bulb is a sort of a toothy shaped thing. How would you deal with which ends up?
Okay, generally when they're dormant you can actually see which ends up, because it has the old tuft of roots left. So if you have a look at this is where most of the root is coming from, so that's the base. It never hurts to put them on their side if
I was
you're
going to say that,
concerned about which way up a bulb goes.
Yeah.
It's
Because they're
better-
not
better
like a
than upside
daffodil.
down. No. No.
You can virtually obviously see with most bulbs which way is in fact up.
But sometimes you can't with these. But generally it's going where that old root system has come from.
All right.
You'll be able to tell. You're going to get another one out of there.
All right, here we go. Sorry, fellas.
So while Stephen's doing that, the size of this one for a revolutum isn't flowering size. So generally they would need to be half again bigger to be a flowering size.
This one's getting a little closer.
Yeah.
So here we've got...
You should have started with that one.
Yeah, I should. Yeah, I didn't know where it was. All right, well, this one is a larger bulb, as you can see, and also still has that sort of canine-like shape. But you can see it's only got one leaf, so it's probably a year off flowering size if it's being well fed and cared for. So it's still not quite as big as you would want if you're buying a flowering size bulb.
Okay, so we're going to try and put this baby back in. So this is the potting mix that we had prepared earlier with the yummy humus and the fertilisers and things. So there we're going to make a little room for its roots down
Which
in
it
there.
probably wouldn't have if it were dormant.
No, if it were dormant, it won't have those active roots. And as you can see there, these delicate, fine roots is another reason why you shouldn't lift them in the green as well. So if we just then pack some soil around him. We might only just do the one in here at the moment.
Now that does raise another question. How many bulbs would you normally pot, and we're talking about them when they're in their dormancy. We've got, what, a 14 or 15 centimetre pot.
Yep.
If you had flowering size bulbs, how many would you present in that size pot? And if you wanted to do a show, how would you go in, say, a 25 centimetre pot?
Okay. So in this size pot, because you're really only going to leave them in there a year, you could put half a dozen. If you're like my mum, everything's got to be in odds. So 3, 5 or 7 is great.
So, yeah, it sounds good.
So Jane likes to put 4 just to,
That's probably
'cause
just
it's
annoys
fun.
mum.
I know, in that size pot. So there's 3 in this sort of smaller
in the
one.
in the flowering plant
Exactly. But if you're talking about an en masse planting in a beautiful terracotta sort of
big
basin
dish or something,
you could put sort of 25, would look absolutely fantastic. So it's only on the size of your container as the limiting of what you can put in.
But but you're going to be working with them on an almost yearly basis anyway. So if they get a bit crowded, you're going to spread them, aren't you?
Yeah, and just remember, if you are sticking more than what I'm sort of recommending into the pot, just make sure that you're adding the equivalent of food and things that they will need, so they don't end up like these sad, sorry little things.
Jane, thank you. Potting 101. I am a pot grower, and I'm very excited to know that you can actually grow them in pots.
See, look what we just did.
Yes, from that poor little thing it flowered immediately.
Look at that, yes, you can grow them in pots.
There's one little question we haven't covered, which I would really like to cover, and that is that I have noticed over the years that some species of Erythronium are vigorous self-seeders. Others seed virtually not at all, but multiply by the bulbs, and they seem to fall into one or other camp.
Yes, and that's Mother Nature's way of doing her thing. She either sets lots of seed for her babies, or as you say, that they're doing it vegetatively from making babies on the side.
So your field, your Elysian field of Erythronium, is this?
This is this one, and that is one of the major seed production ones that Stephen's talking about. It doesn't tend to make a lot of its own babies, so it's done through that seed production.
Right, okay.
And you had some.
Let's look at the seeds.
Yes.
So these are the pods from last year.
Now, I see what you mean. They are really quite striking.
Beautiful,
and
aren't
they kind of bear no resemblance to the flower.
Yeah. So they do it quite differently.
And so inside that capsule is
Here's
this
a whole pile of that.
beautiful seed.
Now, we did a seed propagating special. Would you just sprinkle those on the surface with a bit of grit over
Yes,
the top?
exactly. Yep, exactly.
We know all about that. Well, I do, you do. You're professionals, I'm not. Now, my other question then is, in Australia, this is not their native habitat, and even here, which is a temperate climate, is there an issue in summer with heat, with that paddock getting quite dry? Do they desiccate?
No. because they pull themselves down too. They're down into where the soil's cooler.
So they'll find
as
the
well.
optimum spot.
Exactly.
Oh my goodness.
So
They are
it
sentient.
makes them very clever.
These are
Yeah.
thinking people's plants.
So you will have to move your pot cool and dry, as we were saying
If they're in
before,
pot
over
culture,
the summer,
yeah.
if you're doing pot culture. The other thing people always say, you know, I'm scared that I'm going to lose it in my garden, so I'd rather grow it in a pot. The other trick is that you can bury a pot with just the lip showing,
Yeah.
and that keeps your soil temperature a lot cooler
Right.
as well, but it's still in a pot where you can find it, and you're not sticking the fork into it when you're looking for your daffodils.
Although you'd need to have a quite long pronged fork for some of these erythroniums.
Yes.
And I remember trying to dig some out of a friend's garden who had passed away, and they were just different colours I wanted, and I had to dig them in flower. And I easily went down about a foot in the old measurement, following the leaf stem all the way down to find the bulbs. It took me forever.
That's
Which is
dedicated.
why-
Well done.
You will pay a premium for Erythronium bulbs, and the fact that in supermarket, you know, in hardware stores when they're in packets, you were saying, you know, if people have squeezed the bulb, you can't see that it's damaged.
Yeah,
it's a
and
risky...
they do break quite easily.
Yeah, and the other issue is, of course, you don't know how long they've been sitting out of the ground, and erythroniums don't have a tunic over them to protect the bulbs from desiccation, so they need to be dealt with promptly.
Yeah, they can't store as long as your daffodils and tulips,
Oh
and
my
they
goodness.
need to be stored sort of cool and dry. You can actually store them with a little bit of peat moss, as dry peat moss, that'll stop them.
Moral of this story is visit Tonkins, Tonkins bulbs and perennials online, or any seller near
So
you.
these will be available from January onwards.
Yep.
Yeah, in Australia and in the States, obviously very easy, and in Britain, any kind of woodland and rare plant specialist.
Yep.
Jane, what a delight and a pleasure. Thank you so
No,
much
thank
for having
you.
us.
Thank you.
We'll be back.
Excellent.
Well, we
Great.
will, because
There's lots more.
as
Yep.
it says here, bulbs and perennials. So my eyes have just been Googling at your shade houses and all the plants. So we'll have to come back and just look at your rare bulbs.
Thank you. You're welcome back anytime.
Thank you very much. Now, we do post every week, so if you want to know what our continuing adventures might be, do hit subscribe. Stephen, how can we possibly top Jane Tonkin and her fabulous Erythronium paddock?
Can't be done.
Can't be done,
Excellent.
Jane.
See, no, you've made my day.
But we will try, so do join you next week, and we'll see you then.
Bye all.